Well, church, happy Sunday. You are the original item, Fountain Street Church. Often imitated, never duplicated. You are a shelter in the storm, church. And this place is hopping. It's great. Dick Wood and I were taking a breather yesterday by the front door, just watching people streaming in and out of the building. Yesterday afternoon. The choir was having a big retreat. It was beautiful. And in the chapel, there were some wonderful folks from Palestine Solidarity Grand Rapids. And downstairs, there was a training taking place all day for street medics, people who do emergency medicine here in the community. Man, the human beings were singing, and they were learning and training and working, creating. All the energy was very hopeful. That's beautiful. And our church calendar reflects this energy and this hope. I realize that it is, I'm somewhat new as well, and I realize it can be hard to get plugged in to a lot of the things that are happening around here in the church. We are working on that. If this was a big conservative megachurch type operation with a bunch of rules, cool laser lights on pews. I don't know. I don't know what they do there. These fundamentalists. I don't think I've been to a mega church in over a decade. Let's say, I think we got like a list on the wall of the people that are trying to read books to our kids. So. Consumer religion. It's for people who are addicted to rules. If we were a consuming church instead of a creating church, we would have a pretty slick process for a lot of the things that we do. Sorting everybody into little groups with a little mission, and you get assigned your little boxes on the hillside. We don't have that because we are a place of intense creative energy, and so we're a frontier church with very high expectations, but it can be challenging to get plugged into what's going on here, and we are working on that through that Church Center app that I just talked about, through the calendar, through the sign-up process, and through the Chimes, which is our newsletter that you can sign up for. But to my earlier point, Dick and I were sitting there, and I really like talking to Dick Wood. Probably a whole lot of the stuff that we're actually working on would get done if I didn't like talking to you people so much as I do. We were both commenting on the diversity of ages of the people coming and going to the programs, which is a straightforward indication that the intergenerational work that's being done here is being done here. That can be an opportunity for healing. It can be an opportunity for healing generational trauma. There can be opportunities for making generational investments that cause generational shifts. It is glaciers that carved the shape of Michigan. So we heard about that just now with those two readings, the poetry, this tremendous echo, these two women's songs that were just shared, this poetry, first from the Denise Levertov, a very liminal voice for this church on the cusp. She wrote, "We've only begun to love the earth. We've only begun to imagine the fullness of life." Can you imagine that being true? You could say that to a baby, I think. You've only begun to understand how much you're loved. To say to the people of this place, in this world, at this time, we've only begun to love the earth, that is a tremendous promise of hope. We've only begun to know the power that is in us if we would join our solitudes in the communion of struggle. So much is unfolding that must complete its gesture, and so much is in bud. This is poetry about the movements that take generations to accomplish. And the Hebrew psalmist, we heard, cries out to us from 3,000 years ago, writing, "I will sing of the faithful love of the fount of life forever, and with my mouth I will make known your faithfulness from across the generations." And then her God responds in kind. The womb of life declares, "Your throne that I will build will be to all generations." To all generations. So many movements and many churches in America specifically were built to sustain and keep one very specific generation of people. The evangelical movement that arose out of the 1960s and 70s in America was built specifically to cater to the needs of white American baby boomers. And this is why things like the Sinner's Prayer, it's written by Billy Graham, caught on like wildfire. And it came then praise band music, Christian rock, which somehow is neither, but at the same time. They built churches like stadiums and amphitheaters, conference centers, because that generation, the baby boomers, wanted two things, or at least a segment of them wanted two things. They wanted a reaction against their parents' churches, the churches that were built and sustained by the greatest generation, the World War II generation churches. These were these towering Gothic cathedrals, New England, sort of Georgian style buildings. And then they wanted to make repentance into a process, a kind of way to put boundaries around the procedures. And they wanted to do what I think all humans have tried to do, to separate the holy from the profane and the clean from the unclean. And thus the white evangelical movement we know today in America was born out of that desire. And then their kids, reacting to this, are now returning to the churches of their grandparents and great-grandparents. That's why we see increased attention being paid to some of our cathedral spaces. So I encourage people to always be careful with your words in an intergenerational context. I was talking to somebody recently who's a member of this church, but who was not yet old enough to vote in this past election. And they said, just kind of offhandedly, you know how much it sucks to hear people saying that there won't be another election in America? Yeah. I should have said, I'll say now. It isn't up to us to decide that right now. It is only up to us to decide the nature of the nation that they will inherit and the conditions that they will inherit. And so when our lament and concern for the state of things collapses into just raw despair for the forever future, we're making decisions about the color and features of a landscape that we have never seen and will never visit. To every young person who is hearing my words, but who's also hearing these predictions and prognostications about the condition of the world in which you will live the majority of your life, I say, just wait. Do not accept my words or the words of these folks as if they have been to your future, as if they've walked the streets of your future, because they have not been there, they have not seen it, and you have as much power as the rest of us to create the world in which you want to live. Every generation believes that they are the last. Lament and despair, if you must, for the state of this nation and for the condition of our democracy today. Lament and despair for the very real pain that is happening and may happen as a result of the choices of people in power today. But please understand that none of us have any idea what kind of world the next generation will build. And none of us have any idea what their hands will bring into creation. They are the midwives of their world, not us. And that is why we owe them everything we have. And then that bill will come due, regardless of what we may or may not desire. That's the handoff. We pay that bill, but we don't get to tell them what their world is going to look like. We may be handing them some very seriously broken machinery. We may be returning the car to the garage with 3 flat tires and an empty tank, right? And that's on us. But we don't know what they're capable of. And honestly, after having spent kind of a lot of time with Generation Z and then now Generation Alpha, I think they're going to create things that are beyond our capacity to imagine. Right? So don't let us be so quick to condemn their future. I think they're up to it. I mean, they're here. You can ask them. This is the kind of church that attracts the kind of young people who aren't content to live in a society that they had no hand in creating. This is what we mean when we describe an intergenerational church. I'll tell you a couple of fascinating things about having served intergenerational churches. And that's what this is. Not all churches try to be that way, but you always have tried to be that here. I love it. For the purposes of the work of the church, I break humans out into 6 generational cohorts in these 20-year intervals. And the reality is, from observing your history and your demographic trends, was that when Fountain Street Church is really hitting on all cylinders, you do develop something I call generational parity. Generational parity. This means that you've got an equal representation between the generations. And not just equal numbers, mind you, but equal representation, equal enfranchisement, equal in the church leadership, in the budget, on the staff, in the way that we do worship, in everything. Oh, you've had this a few times in your history. You had it going really good in 1910. I know that seems like a long time ago to you people, but I read a lot of dusty books, okay? That's like yesterday in my brain, you know. You had it in 1960. You had it in the mid-90s. About every 40 years, you hit this stride with this particular metric. I'm not saying that everything was good in those times. In the 1910s, your church burned down, for Christ's sake. Bad things happened too. But from a purely demographic perspective, you had this thing going. And you're due for another solid run at this about 2030. It's a little nascent right now, but it's like starting to make itself known. And so, as I said, I've served churches that have had it, that have been at the apex of this. It's one time I had a staff person who was responsible for all of the new member recruitment and management and engagement. That was nice. This person was a born evangelist for this particular non-creedal church, this place where people could bring their whole selves, and there were no purity tests or tests of faith, anything like that. And they get these new people. They go out in the city and find them, and they get them in the church for a concert or a show or a lecture, or vegan potluck or something. And they pull together the numbers. And if they were short on people in their early 20s in joining the church, they would haul the campus minister in here by their collar, shake them down for some college students. And if they're short on folks in their 80s and 90s, they would get out to the retirement village or the managed care facilities. They get a bus running on Sunday morning. You know, man, it was just amazing. That was a trip. So we had this nice even split between the generations. I'd look out on Sunday, and there they all were sitting in the pews, and the church had pews. So we would have generational parity, but there was a wild thing that would happen with that, and it's something that I really want to call your attention to just briefly, is because people's brains, people aren't programmed to see the things that look like them. Okay, this is a little counterintuitive. In America, most of us spend most of our time around people who are the same age as us. And when we're spending time with people in different generational cohorts, we tend to have there's a power relationship with them. If you're in your 30s and you are spending a lot of time with somebody in their 60s, it's often the case that person is your supervisor at work. Or that person is an elder in your family. They occupy the role of a parent or a grandparent or something. Okay, and so we have these defined roles, and we don't often go into communal spaces where there is equity and there is shared responsibility, and we can create that in the church. But in these churches where this happens, I would have an older member, maybe somebody in their 80s, would they come up to me on a Sunday, and they would say, "Well, preacher, I'm pleased with all the new faces around church, but I feel like I'm the only old person around here anymore. All I see are these young families everywhere. Everyone's so young." And I think, well, yeah, 30% of them are, that's... Or they would say, "Whose kids are these?" I would say, "Well, you ought to know. Those are your kids, friend. It takes a village, raise a child." We talked about this on Halloween, too. You aren't in the village. You are the village, right? And I figure it takes probably about 8 adults to raise a child. Maybe you can do it with 4 or 5 if some of them really know what they're doing. But so if you see a young face around the church and you don't know whose kid that is, well, that's your kid. You should know their name. Keep an eye on them. No, I'm kidding. Don't do that. You don't need to. If kids have to run a little wild at Fountain Street Church. I also know this from your history. If kids didn't run a little wild at Fountain Street Church, you wouldn't have the Tower Club. Why is it called the Tower Club? Yeah, ask somebody who knows. All right. If we didn't have kids that ran a little wild around FSC, we wouldn't have had all those famous bands and musicians and radicals that y'all love to brag about so much. You wouldn't have those great voices that stood where I'm standing right now. It was not a committee of elders that decided to take a chance on booking a little Irish band called U2 to play a concert here. I mean, hell, the legend says that Eleanor Roosevelt spoke here because she couldn't get enough of the young women in this church and their ferocity. Her words, not mine. So, okay, this is young folks, this is a place where they're seen and heard and hopefully listened to. And then I'd have a young person come up to me and say, I really like attending a church that's mostly older people. I'd say, well, that's just as many of them as there are of you, friend. But this is how it works in churches with generational parity. You look out and then you over-represent in your mind the people who don't look like you or the people that you're not accustomed to spending time with. And you overlook the people who look like the folks that you spend all your time with out there in the world. And so I get it. But the average age of a person who participates in the life of Fountain Street Church probably isn't what you think it is. And I know what it is. But I'm not telling you. And likewise, when you're new to a church, when you're new to any community, it's the easiest thing in the world to look around that room and just assume that everyone else in that room has been part of that community for ages. Because why not? And some of them have. But a lot of the times, those folks, the ones who've been part of the community from birth, they're looking around the room thinking, God almighty, who the hell are these people? And that's why you got to wear your name tags, people. But that's the thing about democracy and these systems and these movements that we build, about enfranchisement and about generational parity. It means that a vote is a vote. Church membership doesn't get more powerful with age. It's not cheese. You're enfranchised because you're here. Because whatever force you want to call it brought you. Destiny, fate, the Holy Spirit, the Fortuna blindly spinning her wheel. Wa'al qadr ala mahfuz. Ya'al ul mazel tov. Whatever it is. The Buddhists might call it pratitya samutpada. You were drawn into this space by something that you're caught up in. And that's it. Whatever drew you into this place did so, and now you're here. And the generations of Fountain Streeters who came before us and our elders said, good, yes, that's it, that's sufficient. That is what is required for suffrage. They're there, now let them act. For God's sake, don't let the clergy get in the way. We have elders here at Fountain Street Church, and I don't call them that because I don't know how they feel about that word. But it's elders in any community are simply people who are all of different ages, but they've carefully observed the tides coming in and going out at this church, watching the way that things always seem to break in the same place and for the same reasons. We have people here in this place who know where the good china is stored. They know how to hang up the banners for Christmas. And they know and remember how to share the oral history of this community. And we need to listen to them and learn to do what they know how to do. But that is wisdom. And in a democracy, wisdom isn't a requirement to vote. Hold on to that one. So when we make these promises from one generation to the next across these great spans of time that actually shape the destiny of a people, we become resilient communities. That's what we build. Resilient communities. America, right, this experiment in democracy was established to be a resilient community. That was one hope of the people who were there at the time. And they based our model of government on a much older, resilient model, on an older federation that they'd observed, which was the Constitution of the Haudenosaunee, the Iroquois, right? A form of representative democracy that was 700 years old when the Constitution was drafted. The Iroquois Confederacy, the origin for our own American system of constitutional government. Right? This isn't me. This is according to Congress. Concurrent Resolution 331 states, whereas the confederation of the original 13 colonies into one republic was influenced by the political system developed by the Iroquois Confederacy, as were many of the democratic principles which were incorporated into the Constitution itself. And so many of us were taught the Constitution, hopefully, but so few of us were taught the Articles of the Iroquois Nation upon which it was based. But I'll share one with you right now. Because American democracy is old, but it's based on older ideas. It's perhaps stolen from them, along with everything else. It was built on the idea of generational parity. Law 28 of the Constitution of the Iroquois Nation, for when a leader is chosen among the people, we now do crown you with the sacred emblem, the deer's antlers, and the emblem of your leadership. You shall now become a mentor of the people of the 5 nations. Look and listen for the welfare of the whole people, and have always in view not only the present but also the coming generations, even those whose faces are yet beneath the surface of the ground, the unborn of the future nation. And so we owe the future a great deal. Personally, I behave as though I owe them everything. In point of fact, as a person with a religious discipline as well as a religious practice, I know that I would die for them. As a church, in this moment, we need to reckon how we will pay our debt to those who have yet to be born. This place can be a treasure for our descendants to receive from us as a gift for their welfare and survival and for thriving and making beauty together. Or it can be left as a costly burden to be abandoned by the side of the road or relegated to history. I believe it's a treasure. That's why I'm here. And this is why I'm comfortable talking to us about everything, transparently. Our finances, our pledges, the money that we bring in, the work that we invest in this place, the cost of it, how we do it in a way that's wise. Because while I am here and I'm committed to serving you as your pastor, your minister, your clergy, I know that many of you are here to serve the future of Fountain Street Church. The future Fountain Streeters that will arrive long after I'm gone. And I want us together to take that commitment very seriously. This is why I ask you to give so generously of your time and your money. Yeah, because in doing this work together, we build an inheritance for people who've yet to be born. Now, I know that many of you have no time today. We're busy, but you have some money, and I understand that you work, many of you, to turn your time into money, and I see your financial support of this place as an investment of the time that you worked to earn that money. And many of you have time, but very little or no money, and I see the time you invest in the work of this church as a sign of your investment here. And I know that this is America, and because America is failing to live up to its promises, I know that many of you have neither time nor money. You are here, though, to put down your marker. You're here to say, today, I cannot afford to give time nor money, but the road is long and the future is unknown. And I am here to say that tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, I will give to build the future our people will inherit. I see you, too. Your pledge to hold fast through any difficult time in your life so that you will give when you're able is a valid pledge. This is why I say to people that it is absolutely good and necessary to pledge even when your pledge today is zero. To pledge yourself to the future by any means is still a pledge, and all pledges are still a sacrifice. So what do we owe the future? If the promises are truly intergenerational, the promises that we make here at Fountain Street Church are not simply for one people of one group and one demographic in one place at one time, but they are for people who have yet to come. If the promises are intergenerational and it's going to be an intergenerational church as it has intended to be for nearly 2 centuries, the answer is simple and obvious. What do we owe the future? We owe them everything. And that is exactly what we will leave them, in whatever condition they may find it. So let them receive a church that's up to the challenges. Let us leave them a fine, fine church, a place where their visions and dreams may find root and grow into the culture, community, society, and place that they need for the world that they will inherit. Amen.